Well, good morning and welcome to SouthPoint Church. We're so glad that you're here. We're one church in two locations. So I want to say good morning to our Lusby campus. Hi, Lusby. I also want to say good morning to our Leonardtown campus. We are so glad that you're here with us this morning. Hey, we are in the last week of our series called Your Story Matters. Matter of fact, we're closing it up today. And as we close it up today, I want you to know if you missed any of these messages, as long as there's the internet and as long as there's electricity, you can go to our website, www.southpoint for you, under our messages, and the whole of the series is there on video. You can watch it, you can listen, you can share it, you can go back and catch up. But today will be a standalone as we close, so if you've missed any, do not worry. But we want to kind of go back to all the way to week one. And so week one, we asked a really important question because week one started at the beginning of the year. And here was the question that we asked: do any of us, do you, do I, do we, do any of us really want to just get through another year? I mean, do we want to get through another year and go, man, I'm glad I made it through the day. I'm glad I made it through another week. I'm glad I made it through another month, or I just made it through. I mean, if we're really honest, we want to live in a way that we can answer some really important questions. Some important questions like, hey, did my life count? Hey, did me being here, did it make a difference? Hey, me being alive on the planet, is the world a better place because I'm here? We want to live in such a way during the day, through the week, through the month, through the year, that our lives will make a difference, that they'll count, that in some sense it will leave a legacy. Matter of fact, that's why we love stories. We love the stories that we love. We love the stories that are important. We love stories because in the stories, the hero or the heroine or the team, they always do something that's amazing, and they leave a legacy. They leave the world a better place than they found it. And that's why we love stories. We love movies. But here's the thing I discovered about stories, whether it's books, whether it's a play, whether it's a movie, whether it's a comic, whatever kind of stories that you enjoy, I discovered stories have a flaw. And here's the flaw: no matter how great the story is, the story has a flaw, because listen, your attention span and my attention span and time and resources are limited. Think about it. Like, you're willing to read a book that may be so big, but when it gets to a certain number of pages, you're like, I'm out, right? Am I the only person that looks at books that way? Okay, thank you for some of you being honest right now, right? There's only so many pages to a book. There's only so many hours that you're willing to sit in front of a screen. There's only so long before you need to have an intermission of a play. The problem or the flaw with stories is our attention span and our time is limited. And so in stories, you don't always get the whole story. And in stories, and the reason that we love stories is because stories have something in them called, and it's a big myth, here's the flaw, it's called the myth of the big moment. I mean, come on, think about the greatest play that you watch. Think about the book that you love. Think about your favorite movie, whether it's a trilogy or whatever. Think about it. And whatever is your favorite story, there's probably one scene or one moment or one chapter or one instance where the hero, the heroine, or the team has to make a choice, and it's in this big moment that they make this decision, or they make this choice, or they act in such a way, and it moves us, and we go, I want to live like that. But here's the problem. That moment may be a big moment in that story that's a book or a chapter or a 3-hour film. But the reality is there's more than that one big moment. I mean, come on, think about it. Even movies nowadays are changing. Even directors in Hollywood are understanding that, listen, there's more than one big moment in a story. I mean, think about it. When I was growing up, one of the movies that I loved was Star Wars. And there was and I'm talking about the original Star Wars people, one person's very excited about that, right? Okay, the original Star Wars, and there was Star Wars, and then The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. It was like a trilogy, and we thought, oh my gosh, 3 movies, that's so long. But in the first movie, there was big moments, and in The Empire Strikes Back, there was big moments. And then think about it, Lord of the Rings, there was a trilogy, and then there are other movies that came out. Harry Potter, there was 8 of them. right? And think about Avengers. Anybody here like the Avengers? I like the Avengers, right? I mean, there's the Avengers Age of Ultron. There's Avengers Civil War. There's the Avengers Infinity War coming. Like, it's going to be like 5 films. And any Hunger Games fan, the book series was actually really good. I highly recommend it, right? I mean, they made that into 4 movies. And you know why that they're moving to just less than standalones? It's because they realized that to tell a whole story, you have to have more than one big moment. But the big moment is the part of the story we love, isn't it, right? It's the thing that moves us. It's kind of like in the scene where someone goes, listen, this thing is all busted and broken, and I might lose my life or I may lose stuff, but I'm going to step into this moment and try to fix what is broken, to make what is wrong right, to overcome evil with good. And we love it. It moves us. It inspires us. And if we are really honest, that's what we want for our life. We want to experience the big moment in our life where we get to step in and we get to count and we get to make a difference. Except, and this is the part none of us are going to like. I didn't like it when I wrote it. I didn't like it when I thought it. And you're not going to like it when I say it. Is that the big moment is a myth. It's got some problems. I mean, come on, think about this. Think about this. Listen, in all the movies, the big moment really isn't a big moment. It's a moment that was led up to by a bunch of other moments. And then think about it. Even the movies you like, even the stories you like, there were probably big moments in other books or in the prequel or in the sequel or whatever it was. There wasn't just one big moment. There were a bunch of moments that led to that moment, and there were moments after that moment. It's a myth that there's just one big moment where you leave a legacy. And then think about it. What happens for the everyday normal people? Listen, I've never ever had to push someone out of the middle of the road and get hit by a car for them. It just never happened. I've never had to jump in front of somebody who's getting shot to save them with my life, you know? Like, I've never been somewhere where I had to run into a burning building. I know some fire people and some first responders, and we're grateful for you guys. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen who serve on the front lines, whether you're in the police or on the rescue squad or in the fire department or wherever you serve to help us in the hospitals. You know, we're grateful. But for everyday normal people, I don't know if a big moment's ever going to happen. Like, I don't know about you. I'm just a dad. Like, I have a job, I'm a dad, I work. The biggest moment I have is at the gym when the weight falls on my chest. Like, I mean, come on, right? Like, so for normal people, what happens if there's no big style of movie moment? And then here's something else that is a problem with waiting for the big moment. Here's what I've discovered. You know what? Moments don't make you. Listen, this is, please, everyone, if you don't hear anything else, you have to hear this morning, so kind of look forward. Ready? You aren't made in the moments. Moments only reveal who you already are. Moments don't make you. They just reveal who you already are. So if you're living one way and you hope to reverse all of that in one special moment, it's not going to happen because moments don't make you. They only reveal who you already are. And then lastly, here's the other problem with the myth of the one big moment. If we're waiting for one big moment, what happens to a bunch of small moments that may be right in front of us to make a difference? And you know what we discovered? If you and I buy into the myth of this one big moment to leave a legacy, it can actually rob us. It can delay and it can destroy leaving a legacy in the here and now. Matter of fact, this leads me to our opening truth. It's a truth you know, it's a truth I know, it's a truth we don't want to say out loud, but you can pull it out on your insert. It's going to show up on the screen. Listen, a legacy isn't made by being great in one big moment. It happens by being great in a bunch of little moments. A legacy isn't made by being great in one big moment. It happens when we are great in a bunch of little moments. Some of you are like, I don't know if I buy into that. Well, how about real life stories? Let's get away from movies. Let's get away from fiction. Let's get away from the books. Let's talk about the real life people who've made a huge difference. Now, it's Black History Month, and one of my favorite scientists and one of my favorite inventors, one of my favorite people growing up as a little kid who I studied, George Washington Carver, was brilliant, was a man beyond his time. And he didn't have like one big moment. Matter of fact, he had a lot going against him. In the era that he grew up, he was discounted because of the color of his skin, yet he thought, listen, I don't care what people think about me. I think God might have a plan for me. And here's what he said. He said, if you, in the common moments, do the uncommon thing, the world will stand up and take notice of you. See, George Washington Carver knew it wasn't about being great in the big moments. It was about being great in a bunch of the small moments. Think about Mother Teresa. There were no big, great moments for Mother Teresa. It's not like all of a sudden someone said, oh, we think you should be famous. Matter of fact, she says there are no great deeds. There's only deeds done in great love. I mean, think about Helen Keller, who changed how disabled people were treated and viewed and moved forward in life. There wasn't one big moment that she stood up. It wasn't one big speech. It wasn't one big rally she went to. She lived a life where she was impacted, and then she helped impacted other people. Think about someone like Nelson Mandela. There wasn't one big moment. He spent a lot of years in prison where it wasn't easy to be great in the small moments, yet he chose to do that. And we could go on. We could talk about Abraham Lincoln. There wasn't one big moment. There were a bunch of small moments where he had failed and he didn't get elected and he didn't do this and he made a mistake there and he didn't do this and these people failed. And he just chose to continue to be great in the little moments. Dr. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, the heroes that we look back in the real life that really left a legacy weren't great in one big moment. They chose to be great in a bunch of little moments. Now, I'm going to be honest. I love the myth of a one big moment. I like it. You know why I like it, and you know why you like it? Listen, come on now. This is where we have buckle up moments at SouthPoint. It's just where we tell the truth. It's like, I don't like it, you may not like it, and this might be emotionally hard, but we're going to put on our big people, big people pants. We're going to buckle up, ching bang, right? Okay. Listen, here's why I discovered we love the myth of the one big moment. See, remember last week we talked about to be able to make a difference requires something of us, and life is always trying to bribe us, right? Life is always trying to bribe us into comfort and convenience and safety. And so here's what we want to do. We would love for the myth of the one big moment to be true because, listen, then we can pursue our comfort, we can pursue our convenience, we can pursue our safety all of our life, and then we can wash it all away in one big moment. But it's a myth. That isn't how it works. And when you and I choose to buy into the myth of the one big moment, we rob ourselves of leaving a legacy, of living in a way that when we ask some important questions, did my life count? Did me being here make a difference? I don't think we'd like the answer. So how do we not let ourselves be robbed by buying into this myth? Well, here's the great news. You and I don't have to guess at this answer. A matter of fact, Jesus thought that this was so important that Jesus himself addresses this very issue. And not only does he address it, he makes sure it's one of the last issues that while he's here on the earth, that Jesus addresses this very issue because Jesus knew that every generation, that my generation, your generation, the next generation, every generation would struggle with the myth of the one big moment that could probably and may rob us of leaving a legacy. As a matter of fact, we see this in the eyewitness account of the Gospel of John. John 13 is going to be up on the screen. It's the night before Jesus is about to be crucified. The night before Jesus is about to be murdered and unjustly condemned and tortured, abandoned and betrayed. He is literally about to go through hell. His last night with his disciples, his posse, his squad, as we would say. So whatever he says on this very last night must be pretty important because it's going to be probably one of the last few times that he's with the disciples. John 13, 1 through 5, and it says, before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. He had loved his disciples during his ministry on earth, and now he loved them to the very end. It was time for supper, and the devil had already prompted Judas, Simon of Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God, and that he would return to God. I'm going to come back to that, but just put that away. So he got up from the table, he took off his robe, he wrapped a towel around his waist, he poured water in the basin, and he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around them. Now, I don't know about you, but that's weird. Right? Come on, I know this is church, but can we be honest? Like washing people's feet, like I have a thing with feet, like I don't like them, like please wear shoes. I like flip-flops, but like just don't get them near me. Like I don't like feet. The idea of washing a foot, like I feel like burping, that is where you kind of, burp and throw up at the same time. Like it's weird to me. I don't get the concept that people would wash other people's feet. But you have to understand, in Jesus' day, that's all they had was bare feet and flip-flops and sandals. And you have to understand, they didn't have paved roads. And you have to understand that they had an agrarian culture. And so there'd be sheep and animals and goats and chickens. And it was out in the desert. And so it would get dusty and it was hot. And so you know what happens when something is dusty and you're hot? When you're hot, you sweat. And then what happens when you sweat? All that dust and all that stuff that those animals leave behind that you're walking in gets stuck to your feet. And then what would happen is when you would go into someone's house, the dust and the yuck from where you had walked in this hot, it was inappropriate for you to walk into someone's house like that with all those germs and all that dirt. And so you know what? The lowest job that you could have, even as a slave, the lowest job that anyone could have was to wash someone's feet in between their toe jam and that stuff. Oh. But that's what, do you get that? Jesus, the one who spoke the universe into existence the night before his night, he washed the disciples' feet. He didn't just wash them and then not say anything. It says after washing their feet, he put his robe on and he sat down and he says, do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right. That's because that's what I am. He said, I am the Messiah. I am God's son. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. Now, he wasn't saying you should have a foot washing service in church. I've seen those. I've been a part of them. I was still weirded out, but I did it because I love Jesus. But the thing wasn't necessarily like, hey, wash each other's feet. He was saying, you know that thing that nobody wants to do? You know that thing that is the lowest position? You know that thing where you have to serve someone else to help them get down and dirty, to help them get clean, where it's nasty and where it's messy? You go down and you get involved in that. Man, could you imagine if the church actually did that instead of holding signs and posting on Facebook? Man, we could make a difference in the world. Sorry, I was preaching there. I'll stop. I haven't given you an example to follow. Great news. If you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, you don't have to follow that example. But if you're here and you go, hey, I am a follower of Jesus, I don't know about this Christian thing, but I do know about following Jesus. He says, I've given you an example to follow, to do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth, the slave's not greater than the master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, it's more, he didn't say now that you just know this, glad you came to church today. Woo, let's say amen, let's leave. God will bless you for doing them. Jesus says, you want to leave a legacy? My last lesson is to be great in the small things. To do the things that no one wants to do. To go to the places that no one wants to go. To do the things that the lowest person would do. I'm the Messiah, I did it. Maybe you should follow my example. Just like Jesus left a legacy, he asks us to leave a legacy. Not by waiting for one big moment, but by serving and investing in all the little moments of our life. So what does that look like? So this morning I want to share 3 brief points. They're just going to be brief, I promise. It's a little warm in here today. I think it's supposed to be nice outside, and y'all are like, hey, is this going to be over soon? I get you. I'm with you, all right? Okay, so I'm going to be brief, okay? So here's point number 1. A great legacy is left by helping others win. A great legacy is left when we help others win. A legacy isn't left by being a star. See, come on, everyone look up here, We think a legacy is about having people like us and think great of us. That isn't a legacy, that's just being a star. A legacy is when you help other people win. I was trying to think of what's a practical example of a difference between a star and someone that creates a legacy. How many of you recently know that the New England Patriots, for all you New England Patriots fans, hooray for you. The rest of us think you're bad. But hooray for you. Excited for you. Bill Belichick, one of the greatest coaches of all time, right? He's won 5 Super Bowls as a head coach. And as an assistant coach, he also won 2 Super Bowls with Bill Parcells. He has been a part of 7 Super Bowls. He might be one of the greatest coaches of all time. But here's the thing, he's more of a star than he is a legacy maker, and here's why. Do you know how many of his assistant coaches have gone on to win a Super Bowl? Can you guess the number? The number of coaches that have worked with him over the years and over the decades, how many of them have won a Super Bowl? 0. He's a star. He might be one of the most brilliant guys that there is. But has he left a legacy? Great. And I'm not knocking him. He's a great coach. Awesome. Hooray for him and his fans, and glad that he's got that talent. But did you know there was another coach named Bill who won a Super Bowl? His name was Bill Walsh. I don't know if you remember the 49ers of the 80s, but he coached the 49ers in the 80s with Joe Montana, and he won only 2 Super Bowls. And you might think, he was a pretty good coach, and, they did okay, but he's only got 2 Super Bowls. How great could he be? But do you know who was on his coaching staff? On his coaching staff was a guy named Mike Holmgren, who won a Super Bowl. George Seifert, who took over and won a Super Bowl. Dennis Green, who went on to be a great head coach but didn't. Jim Fassel, Sam Weich, Paul Hackett, and a bunch of other coaches eventually worked for him. Of those coaches, then they became head coaches and had people work for them. Guess how many coaches who coached under Bill Walsh that eventually won Super Bowls? 9. 9. And that doesn't even include the coaches that actually made it to the Super Bowl and didn't win. Do you see the difference? One is a star and one left a legacy. Isn't this what Jesus modeled? Jesus overcame hell and death. He died on the cross because he loves you. So that regardless of our flaws, regardless of our failures, regardless of our circumstances, we could have a destiny. We could have dignity, and we could come home. We pick it up in another eyewitness account. It's coming up on the screen. Acts 4:13 through 14. And it says, the leaders saw how bold Peter and John were. And then here's the important part. They also realized that Peter and John were ordinary men with no training. Think about it. When Jesus left the earth, after he conquered hell and death, he left the fixing of the whole planet to 12 busted and broken dudes and a group of people that included ladies. He left them to ordinary people who had no special training. This surprised the leaders. They realized these men had been with Jesus. Wouldn't it be awesome if the world realized we had been with Jesus? The leaders could see the man who had been healed, and he was standing there with them, so there was nothing they could say. Jesus did more than overcome hell and death. He gives each of us dignity, and he gives each of us a destiny to be world changers. Jesus sets you and I up to win. You want to leave a legacy? Help others win. Now, here's something I need to say. I need everyone to look at it because this is really important. It is impossible. It is impossible to bring value to others if you're living to validate yourself. Please don't miss that. I'm going to say it one more time. It is impossible to bring values to others if you are living to validate yourself. You see, Jesus, when he washed the disciples' feet, before he washed the disciples' feet, he said, I know where I've been. I came from the Father, and I know where I'm going. I'm going back to my Father. You see, the problem for so many of us, and I know I struggle with this all my life, and sometimes it's still a struggle, is I forget where I've been, and I forget where I'm going. Can I get an amen? See, so many of us are worried about what everyone thinks about us, and am I important, and I am a star. And as long as you and I are living to validate ourselves in the eyes of everyone else, we can't bring value to other people because life is all about to leave a legacy and help others win, we have to value others. And as long as we're working to validate our lives, we can't do that. You see, there's 2 things that help other people win. One, you have to win at something. And here's what I discovered. You probably have one at something. I've discovered that every human being on this planet is better at something than I am, and I can learn from them. Could you imagine if church people were that humble? You know, you have to win at something. At some point, you actually have to do the work. You have to kind of work through it. You have to go through it. You can't go over it, around it. You can't pray around it. Sometimes you just got to go through it. You got to work through it, and you have to win, and that's how you can help others win. But then you also have to have a little bit of humility. And I used to think humility was going, I'm not good. And that's false humility. God gives each and every one of us talent. Humility isn't saying I don't have gifts and talents. Humility is saying I know where I've been and I know where I'm going, and life is more than just about me. A legacy is left when I help you win. A great legacy, this is number 2, so if you're following along, you're a type A person, you want to follow along. A great legacy isn't left by being seen. It's left by serving others. I'll never, ever forget. I used to work in an organization called Young Life. Shout out to Young Life. I worked with high school, middle school students for almost a decade. I did this back in Virginia. And back in Virginia, there used to be a housing development that was basically a housing project for low-income families. And I had spent some time there. And so we had this large event at this basketball-like place that had indoor basketball courts, had indoor swimming, and it had a bunch of stuff that you could do. It's kind of like a rec center for kids. And so Young Life, we had this event for a bunch of high school kids, and we had a couple hundred high school students, unchurched high school students from the local high schools come to this event where we played basketball, we did a bunch of fun stuff, and then I got to get up and speak, and I got to give about a 12-minute message, and my whole thing was to introduce kids who had never walked through the doors of the church to hear about Jesus. And I'll never forget, because when we rented this place, we were required by the place to have a police officer on site because we were going to have high schoolers, and those high schoolers, better have some police there. And so we had a police person there, and they did great. We're grateful for the police men and women who serve us and protect us. I get that. And so I'll never forget, though, when I was done talking and I'd given my message, I kind of came off and was hanging out with some people. And then towards the end, the police officer came up to me and shook my hand, and he looked at me and said, "I've never seen that." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "They listened to you." And he's like, "Your talk wasn't that good, dude." No, he didn't say that. But I bet he was thinking it, because he was like, he literally was like, "How did you do that?" Because this was a broad spectrum of students, some from very rough backgrounds, some from really good backgrounds. It was a mixed group of kids. He was like, "How did you get them to listen?" And I go, "You don't understand. They didn't listen to me because of my message. They listened to me because I'm their friend." You see, what you don't know is I've coached their AAU basketball leagues. You don't understand. I stayed after schools. Do you know how many freshman games I've been to? You know how many freshman JV varsity games I've sat at? Field hockey, basketball, soccer. Do you know how many rides I've given home to kids? Do you know how many have them been at my house and played video games? Man, these kids didn't listen to me because I was a great speaker. They listened to me because I'm a friend and I'm in their life. And I like what one author said. I believe it was John Maxwell. He says, people don't care how much you know until they know you. People don't care how much you know until they know you care. See, we think we impact by people by having them look at us. People don't want to care about how good you look. They want to know, do you care about them? I wonder, does the world around the church know that the church cares about them? Or do we just come and look good? Jesus says it this way. This isn't even my idea. This is just straight old school Jesus. If you have a problem, take it up with him. Luke 22, 24 through 27, it says, they began to argue among themselves who would be the greatest. So Jesus has been walking with the disciples for 3 years, and they were all knuckleheads. Here's good news. If you ever felt like you're a knucklehead or you've messed it up and you're like, Jesus, I'm sorry, it's just me again, and you feel bad, listen, the disciples, man, they were with him personally, and they still didn't get it right? And they were arguing about who would be the greatest among them. And Jesus told them, in the world, the kings and the great men, they lord it over people. Yet they are called friends of the people or benefactors. But among you, it will be, what's the word? Okay, woo, man. Let that sit in, church. It's supposed to be different. We're not supposed to lord stuff over people. It's supposed to be different in here. Those who are the greatest among you should be the lowest among rank. The leader should be like the servant. Who is more important, the one who sits at the table or the one who serves? It is the one who sits at the table.
Of course, but not here, for I am among you as one who serves. A legacy isn't about being seen. It's about serving others. You know what I discovered? Our words don't mean anything to people. But I tell you what, you do an act of service, you actually do something for someone, you show a random act of kindness, you smile, you give, you share, you step in, you help, you don't judge, you forgive, you are kind, you are generous. All of a sudden, people will begin to ask, why are you like that? It's not by being seen that we leave a legacy. It's by serving. Which leads me to my last point, is a great legacy doesn't happen by getting press. It happens by passing it on to people. It's not the press that we get. It's did we pass something on to others? I have a friend, and I would call him a friend loosely because he just kind of barely knew me. You probably won't read a paper. You'll probably never hear a book from him. There'll never be a news report. His name was Brad Curl. I knew Brad because some of his kids would come to my Young Life Club, and I ended up coaching some of them in my AAU League team, and they were all from D.C. You see, Brad used to live in the suburbs, but Brad became a follower of Jesus. And so on the weekends, Brad and a couple other guys had this inner city ministry, and they would go into D.C. in the weekends, and they would round up kids, and they would play basketball, and they would feed them, and they would share the gospel, and they would try to encourage them, they would try to connect them to resources. But Brad eventually, as he finished up his career, decided, listen, I keep going in, but kids keep flowing in and out. And he goes, some of them aren't making it. Some of them are literally dying on the streets. And he said, so you know what he did? So he moved out of the suburbs, and he bought like this ranch out in Loudoun County. And he would find kids who were homeless or kids who weren't going to make it on the streets, and he would literally bring them to live with him and his wife, even though he had Parkinson's disease. You think you have an excuse not to do ministry? And he'd bring these kids to live with them so that they would have a chance, so that they could go to a decent school, so they could get out of the streets and they wouldn't get shot and get into the same things. You'll probably never see a press report about a guy named Brad Curl. But he knew what Jesus knew and what you and I know. You can't pass something on from afar. You can't serve from afar. You have to build relationships. You have to invest in people. Jesus was in the people business. Are we in the people business? You want to leave a legacy? Be in the people business. It's not about what they write about you or what they say about you. It's not how many likes you get on Facebook. It's not how popular your Instagram is. When we die, that's not what's going to count. What's going to count is the relationships that you made and that are better because you were here. Jesus says it this way. John 12:23-25, Jesus replied, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very, very, very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls on the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed." Jesus is saying, listen, if a kernel of seed isn't willing to go in the ground and die, it just stays a single kernel. And you know what, if we were honest, and I know in some ways this is hard for me, this is something I wrestle with, maybe it's something you wrestle with, is I want to guard my little kernel, my little life. I want my life to be good. I want me, I don't have so much time, I have so much energy, like I want my little kernel to be awesome. And we want people to write about our little kernel. But Jesus says, but if it dies, it produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, and anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. The only way that we can leave a legacy beyond ourselves is to serve and to invest in others as we give ourselves away. I want to close this whole series with a true story. It's one of the proudest stories that I have to tell as being a pastor. I often meet with people who go, "Hey, I go to your church," and I go, "It's not my church. It's our church, right? Like it's only as good as the people that come, right? Like you're only as good as the team of people." And so we have a great team of people here. And so when I constantly hear, you know what I like about SouthPoint? Well, what is it you like? I like that SouthPoint is diverse. Is anyone glad that SouthPoint is diverse? That we when we look around, this looks like our community. That like we see people who vote differently, think differently, dress differently. We have different skin colors. We come from different Like, aren't you glad? Because this is what heaven's going to look like. This is what the church should look like, right? And some of you may be surprised when you get there. But like, aren't you glad it's diverse? Aren't you glad that SouthPoint is welcoming? But do you know it didn't start this way? Matter of fact, in 2005, when we launched our church, we had a couple hundred people come to our first service. And the only person of color, the only African American we had in our whole church was someone on staff. You remember Elwood and Betty Jones? He was our worship pastor, right? Yeah, we love Betty and Elwood. Shout out to Betty and Elwood, right? They were the only people of color in our church. And so we'd been going for a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden this family, this African-American family, they had a couple of kids. He and his wife, they were coming, and they came more than once. And I said, woo, they came more than once. And so I sat down, and their names are John and Tina Burt. And after they had come a couple times, I found their information, and I called them and said, hey, can I take you out to lunch? We'd love to hear your story. And so I sat down to them, and they were he was in the military, and they'd moved around, and they said, yeah, we kind of like SouthPoint because we've been around the country, and in this community, there weren't a lot of churches like SouthPoint at that time, and so we're really thankful for a church like this. And they said that there is one thing that's a little bit tough, and I go, well, you can go ahead and tell me because I'm not going to be shocked by the answer. And they said, it's hard to come to a church where you're the only people of color. And we have kids, and it's a little bit uncomfortable. And I go, I get it, and I'm sorry. And so I said, could I ask you a favor? And they said, maybe. I think that's a fair answer, right? So I said, I get it. I said, but do you like our church? Do you like our vision? And do you like the fact that we want to be a place for all people? And even in St. Mary's, could this be a place where you can come regardless of what you voted for? You can come regardless of the color of your skin. You can come regardless of your past, right? Can you come here and hear about Jesus? Can we agree that there's more in Jesus to unite us than there is to divide us? Right? Can we agree with that? And so as I talked to him, I said, listen, I get it that like it's uncomfortable, but I said, but if there isn't one couple, if there isn't a first couple that is willing to sacrifice and be the only people of color in our church, then we'll never grow. And we'll never be a diverse church because no one will stay. And I said, I would ask you not only to stay, but I would like you to serve. Maybe, do you think you could be ushers or greeters somewhere in the front, and you can lead that team, and you can help us become a diverse place? And I know that that's a sacrifice for you. It's a sacrifice for your kids because there aren't people that aren't like you, and you have to give up your comfortability to help us do something that we should have already been doing. The church shouldn't have been behind, by the way. And you know what they said? They said, we're in. And they were greeters. And the diversity that we experience here at Leonardtown and the diversity we experience in Lusby is because one couple, even though they had kids, decided that serving Jesus and making a difference was more important than them being comfortable. So I want to ask a question. No, I want to actually challenge you. Can you open your insert there? So in your insert, there's a little thing. It's about serving. And you can serve outside the church with Girl Scouts or coaching. That's great, and I encourage you to do that. So if serving here at SouthPoint isn't your thing, you can do it outside. But I want to specifically ask you, would you be willing to be great in the little moments, maybe weekly or every other week or once a month or twice a month? Would you be willing to be great in the little moments? We have some areas where you could use your gifts and talents. You know, this thing doesn't just happen. People set it up. People, they serve the donuts. There are people who work back with the kids. There are people who sing up here. There's people who run cables. Like, this thing doesn't, I know it looks like magic to you all, but it isn't. It's just people who are willing to be great in little moments. So I'm asking you to do something. I'm asking you to take a look at that card. And there's 5 primary areas, like there's the auditorium. You can, whether it's on the, helping with sound or cables or doing stuff. Maybe there's a frontline team. Hey, if you don't have a restraining order and you can eat a breath mint, you're good. You can work, we always have needs for people who want to work with kids. And, we have different kind of areas for kids, so maybe you don't have to be a teacher. We always have opportunities for people to help us set up. But would you be willing, like the Burts, to be great in some small moments to help us leave a legacy? If you're already doing something, great. I'm not asking you to double down, but if you're here and you're not engaged and you're not being great in the small moments, would you consider serving 2 times a month? Would you consider using your gifts, your talents to help us make Jesus famous? And here's what I want you to do. Don't pick more than 1 or 2. Don't pick 8, because then you won't do any of them. Pick 1 or 2 things, and then don't put in the offering. There's a red tent as you leave. I won't be standing there, so there's no guilt. But would you be willing to put it in there? Let me pray. God, here's what's amazing to me, is that you aren't asking a single one of us in this room to do something that you, Jesus, didn't do. Jesus, you left the comfort of heaven, and you put on a human suit, and you walked this dusty, dirty earth, and you were abandoned, and you were betrayed, and you were beaten, and you were killed, and you washed people's feet to show us that we're meant for more than to consume. We're meant to contribute. And after you conquered hell and death, you give us dignity and a destiny. That we're not meant to just get through life. We're meant to live a legacy. Not in some big, great moment, but by being great in each and every little moment. God, may we, this group of people, follow your example and serve and invest so that people can see how much you love them, so that we can make the name of Jesus famous. This is our hope and our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.